Hi everyone, my name is Abel and I'm a Principal Cloud Advocate and the DevOps Lead at Microsoft. And I'm super excited to be here presenting on getting started with DevOps session. Now, this is the first of 5 sessions in the DevOps learning path, where we give you an in-depth look at the how, why, and what it means to run a successful DevOps strategy in your organization. So in this session, we'll be looking at getting started with DevOps. For this entire series, we will be outlining issues that need to be solved within a company called Tailwind Traders. And just what is going on with Tailwind Traders? They've been growing rapidly, and senior team members have recognized that differing goals across teams has caused a rift in communication and collaboration. So they've started an initiative to implement a DevOps strategy to help with collaborating across their growing teams. So the first thing they'll look at is things like source control, better collaboration tools, and shared tooling in general. And today, we'll discuss how each of these will enable their teams to be successful and grow right alongside their application and customer base. In this session, we'll be covering things like what is DevOps and why is it a good fit for Tailwind Traders. We'll talk about source control with an introduction to Git and GitHub. And we'll take a look at how Tailwind Traders can use Microsoft Teams as their collaboration hub. And we'll talk about how they can extend their DevOps experiences by using Visual Studio Code. Now, before we get into tooling, what exactly is DevOps, right? Because if you ask 10 different people, guess what? You're probably going to get 20 different responses. At Microsoft, DevOps is something very specific to us. So at Microsoft, DevOps is the union of people, process, and products to enable the continuous delivery of value to your end users. Now, I said this very carefully because every word of this definition has meaning. Now notice I didn't say continuously deliver code, because what will that give us? Piles and piles of code sitting on a source control server somewhere. Who cares, right? That does nobody any good. And notice I didn't even say continuously deliver features, because again, we could be delivering feature after feature, sprint after sprint. But if it's not what our end users need or want, we're just wasting time. So the key here is we have to continuously deliver value and doing whatever it takes to be able to do this. But why, right? Why is this so important? Well, the speed of business today is so ridiculously fast that the only way dev teams can keep up and innovate fast enough is if they adopt DevOps best practices. And the sad truth is, if you don't adopt DevOps best practices, your competitors, they either have or they will. And once they do, they will out-innovate you. And when that happens, you become obsolete. And none of us wants that to happen. So this used to be DevOps theory, but we've been doing this long enough now that we have empirical evidence that shows teams that adopt DevOps best practices absolutely out-innovates teams that don't. But it's not easy to do right. To do DevOps correctly, you must address all 3 pillars, right? The people, the process, and the products that help enable everything. Now, the people pillar, that's a cultural shift that needs to occur where everyone from the very top of your organization all the way to the bottom, everybody is hyper-focused on continuously delivering value, no matter what it takes, where any and all walls and areas of frictions, they're knocked down to allow continuous delivery of value. And we need processes in place that will let you innovate fast enough, yet still deliver code of high enough quality, where you have frequent iterations so quick course corrections are possible, where you have automations in place to speed up this process and to reduce human error, where even when your app reaches production, it doesn't end there, because you still need to monitor your app. You still need to know, is my app up or down? Is my app performing well? And what are users really doing in my app? Because those things can help me identify, am I delivering value? Sprint after sprint after sprint. And based off of that, we can course correct in our next iteration if we need to. And guess what? Agile processes, they work perfectly here. And finally, we need products, right? Tools that help enable all of this. And one of the most fundamental and important tools is source control. Now, source control is a form of version control. It uses the concept of code repositories to track changes on all artifacts within the repository. It enables cross-team collaboration through things like branches, versioning, commit history, and code reviews. One extremely popular and useful source control protocol is called Git. A Git repository, at its core, is a collection of files and folders that comprise a product or application. Some common things you'll find in a Git repository are things like the actual source code for the project, a .gitignore file that allows you to tell Git to ignore certain files you're not tracking, and branches that allow you to isolate development from work from your main or production code. So this allowed developers to work on things in an isolated area without affecting a live code base. And changes within those branches can later be merged back into the main branch as work gets completed and reviewed by your team. Now commits that track changes to the artifacts within the repository so that now you can better understand what changed, when it changed, who changed it, and why it was changed. And tags, which point to a specific release of your code base. Now, the true beauty of source control is the ability for an entire team to work on that same code base without stepping on each other's toes through the use of branching, merging, and versioning. Now, the most well-known and the leader in Git repository hosting is GitHub. Now, some of the features that make GitHub so awesome include the ability to track things like issues, bugs, and features across your project. Also, the ability to more easily share and collaborate expertise by encouraging comments and communications at various steps of code writing. And the ability to easily set up a whole bunch of integrations with other surfaces like Microsoft Azure. And you even have the ability to do work inside a hosted instant, fully featured dev environment through code spaces on GitHub without ever having to leave your browser. Now, one of the most powerful features inside of GitHub is GitHub Actions. This allows teams like Tailwind Traders to automate their software workflows with world-class continuous integration. So what this means for Tailwind Traders is they won't have to worry about manually kicking off builds, testing, and deploying to validate their products are ready to be deployed. So with a little setup, GitHub Actions can handle that and make sure their product is all bundled up and ready to deploy as developers submit pull requests, also known as code reviews, to their projects. And all of this means the developers at Tailwind Traders have a more streamlined process for delivery of their applications. So less time spent on mundane tasks and more time spent on doing what they do best, which is writing code for their projects. So what are some of the things you'll find in a GitHub project that you won't find in a standard Git repo? Well, first, you have a README Markdown file that allow teams to better document the project within their repository. Also, a security Markdown file that allow teams to define their security policy. A license file that defines the license for this project, and code owners file that allow teams to define who is responsible for what parts of the code base. Pull requests also are super cool because that allows you to request to merge a set of changes that exist in one branch into another branch. And this feature also allows teams to double check work and communicate changes before they're merged into the code base. So issues is another thing, right? Issues allow you to track things like bugs, features, or general requests within your code base. And bundles of specific iterations of your projects, those are referred to as releases. So let's take a quick look at GitHub in action. So as you can see, Tailwind Traders, they've uploaded their website as a project on github.com. And this project is called Tailwind Traders-website. So this is the main branch, and this is the source code that exists inside the main branch. If we click on the main button over here, we'll see I have a whole bunch of branches, and we also have a license file. And we can see that we are using the MIT license. We also have a readme.markdown file, and this file gets rendered down below and shows information about this repository. So things like requirements, prerequisites, ways to deploy the project, specific information about this project that I think collaborators need to know. So this is a very important step in creating your project in GitHub. Now across the top we have tabs like this pull request that shows all the open pull requests, which are requests to merge changes from one branch to another. And this is where our team can collaborate and review changes together before they get merged into our main code base. All right, let's go ahead and check out the Actions tab. And this is where you would go to set up or manage your action workflows. So things like CI/CD, which is continuous integration and continuous delivery. We also have the Security tab, and this shows things like your security policy and advisories. Now, if you don't have a policy, you can set it up here by clicking Start Setup. So you click this button, and this will pre-populate with a sample security policy.markdown file. We can click on the Preview button, and now we can see how the markdown will be rendered, and we can see our policy shows supported and unsupported versions, and it also shows how to report a vulnerability. And if I wanted to, I can commit this file right to the main branch, or I could use DevOps best practices and create a new branch for this commit and start a pull request. And I can do all of this right here from within my browser. All right, let's take a look at the insights. And here you can show different analytics about your projects, information about your community, traffic, commits, how many pull requests you've had, things like that, right? And in the settings, this gives you access to things like managing access. So you can see I've added Able to this project here. And you can set up security and analysis features as well. And you can change your default branch name if you want to. You can set up protection rules where you can disable force pushing and branches from being deleted. You can also set up webhooks, which allow external services to be notified when certain events happen. And you can see I've set up 2 webhooks already for notifications within our team. And under the Notifications tab, you can set up who will actually get notified, right? You can either put in emails or an entire list. You can also set up different integrations, deploy keys, actions and permissions, moderations. Ooh, check out the moderations. This is kind of neat. This is where you can restrict users from interacting with your repository for a 24-hour period. All right, let's go back to pull requests, and we'll check out a pull request that Able did. So here, he added a security.markdown file to the project, and he created this pull request to get permission to merge his changes from his personal branch into the main branch. Now, when we go into the Conversations tab, you can see that there has been one commit that added the security.markdown file. And this is where continuous integration and testing would have run with GitHub Actions if it had been set up. You can also see this branch has no conflicts with the base branch, which means if we click that merge button, it will just merge cleanly into the main branch. Now, if we go to the Commits tab, we can see one file was added, and if I click on File Change, I can literally see everything that was changed. And I can also click here to leave an inline comment. And when I add this inline comment, it's going to create for me a review request. Now, if we go to the Conversations tab, we can see this review request in detail, and you'll see this yellow box, right? This shows this is in review, and I've started a conversation. So now here is where the rest of the team can weigh in with comments and suggestions before they allow this merge to go through. Or someone can come in and approve this, which would allow the merge to happen. All right, let's look at a pull request that I created myself. And as you can see, we can drill into the commits, and I can see I created a file, and I can go to the File Changes tab, and here I can leave a comment for myself, and I can still start a review process even though I created the comment. Now, if we go into the Conversations tab, you'll notice that I can still see the review section. I can still leave comments, but I am no longer able to approve my own requests. And this reinforces best practice around having your team peer review every change before merging. All right, let's look at adding and removing code. If we click on the Add File button, here we can create a brand new file or upload new file all directly from the browser. And if we click on this code, this is where we can create a repo locally, right? So let's go ahead and do that. If I type git clone with that URL, it's going to pull down my remote repository and stick it on my machine. And I can cd into this directory, and that will take me to my repository on my machine. Now, following best practices, you never want to make changes to your main or production branch. So let's go ahead and create a brand new branch. I'm going to add a collab.txt file. So let's call this branch collab-file. And I'll do this from the browser. And we just created a brand new branch, right? So now let's pull this branch down locally. So I'll issue the command git pull. And this will pull that branch down. And to use this branch, we can check it out by saying git checkout collab-file. And now we're in the collab file branch. Now it's based off of the main branch, so you're still going to see the same files. But now when we do work, we're in that isolated branch. So we're going to create that collab.txt file. And once I do that, let's do a git status. And you'll see that we have a new file, but it's not being tracked. And that's because collab.txt didn't exist previously. So we need to add it, right? Let's issue the command git add collab.txt. And this will tell Git to start tracking this specific file. And now when we do a git status, we'll see that there is a change. We added the file and it's ready for a commit. So we'll go ahead and do a commit, which is git commit-m with a short message that tells us what this commit was for. And once that's done, we'll do a git.push, and this will push those changes back into the browser, or not browser, back into GitHub. So we'll jump back to the browser to take a look at what that looks like. So it says, guess what? Collab file, it had one recent push less than a minute ago. If I refresh this browser, we'll be able to see the collab.txt file, and bam, there it is. So that's awesome. So the next step is to get my changes into the main branch, right? So which means I have to create a pull request. So I'm going to go ahead and leave a comment here. Let's say adding a collab.txt file. And you can see it's going from the collab file branch to the main branch. And I can go ahead and create that pull request. And now we open up the conversation and it's checking for the ability to merge my changes automatically. And under the file changes, I can enter a comment to start a review of this pull request. And now that I've started that review, I can start a conversation, right? And here, my team can now jump in, review my code, and give me suggestions. Or if everything looks good, they can go ahead, approve my changes to be merged into the main branch. So right there, that's a quick run through of GitHub and how to use GitHub for both source control and for your pull requests. So Tailwind Traders, they have GitHub projects for their applications, and they're on the right track now. But there are other things they'll need to keep track of as well. Things like communications with the team, calendars, conference calls, meetings, files that they use. So how can teams like Tailwind Traders more easily collaborate across their organizations? So this is where Microsoft Teams comes in. Microsoft Teams is the hub for teamwork. Some key features that make Microsoft Teams so great are the ability to chat, meet, call, and collaborate from anywhere. And with a full Microsoft 365 integration, you can easily schedule meetings, check out your calendar, and join conference calls directly within Microsoft Teams. And if you need to chat with your teammates, you have instant messaging built in across your organization as well. Microsoft Teams can also be extended with countless integrations for other applications and services. And by using Microsoft Teams, Tailwind Traders is able to simplify and effectively amplify collaboration across their entire organization with minimal effort. And speaking of integrations, Microsoft Teams has an integration for GitHub via the GitHub for Teams app. It allows you to subscribe to projects within GitHub to get updates on issues, inspect commits, collaborate on pull requests, and much, much more, and all without ever having to leave Microsoft Teams. You can also add a tab at the top of a channel so the entire team can more easily track things like pull requests. And this integration allows teams like Tailwind Traders to more easily collaborate on changes within their code base without having to jump back and forth between different applications. Another awesome integration within Microsoft Teams and GitHub is the GitHub Enterprise app, because this allows you to set up a connector that sends notifications directly into a specific Microsoft Teams channel about updates and changes that happen inside of your GitHub project. You'll be able to track changes live in a channel and watch and interact with things like commits and pull requests. And what the connector sends into the channel is, of course, completely customizable through a webhook in your GitHub project. So let's take a quick look at Microsoft Teams in action. As you can see, Tailwind Traders, they've started to configure Microsoft Teams as their collaboration hub. So first, they created a Tailwind Traders team, and you can see if I go to manage this team, they have lots of members and guests that are invited, and I can see their roles, I can change their roles, I can set tags, locations, things like that. And under the teams, we have a general channel for general chatting. We have an Azure Board web channel for Azure Boards activity. And we also have a GitHub web channel for GitHub activity. Now let's take a look at the general channel, and you can see notifications are already happening from the integrations that I've added. If we go to the Files tab, these are the files we have in our SharePoint. And if I click on this file, it will open up this file where I can start editing it right here inside of Teams. And if I want to, I can open it on the desktop, or if I want to view this in SharePoint, I can simply click on Open in SharePoint, and it will take me directly to my SharePoint site. We've also integrated with OneNote, so here's my OneNote notebook. And under here, you can see we're capturing meeting notes right now. We've also set up a SharePoint tab, and this will show us any files we create inside the SharePoint for our team. But what about meetings and conference calls? Well, let's take a look. So you can see here that we have a fully integrated calendar, and all my information is right here in Teams. And if I needed to join one of these meetings, I can simply right-click on it and join without needing to leave the Teams experience. And what about calls? Yeah, I can do that as well. I can accept calls, I can make calls, and I also have integration to a whole bunch of third-party applications, things like OneNote and SharePoint, and also GitHub. And speaking of GitHub, I've configured GitHub to send me updates from our GitHub projects in real time into our chat. So this helps me keep an eye on things that I care about. We also have this GitHub tab, right? And this will show us all of our live and open pull requests. So those are open and closed for our project. I also wanted live updates to happen in our chat channel, so I used the GitHub Enterprise connector to send these live updates from our project right here into our GitHub web channel. Now, we didn't want to flood the general chat with this type of activity, so that's why we created this separate channel. I've also created an Azure Boards web channel, and we set it up very, very similar to how we set up this GitHub web channel. So this channel is showing us updates inside of our Azure boards where we can keep track of things that's going on, right? So this is our Azure boards, and we're doing all sorts of stuff, right? We're tracking all of our work items for our project. And as work is being done, right, as it's being moved, as work changes, as things gets assigned, all these changes are actually reflected right here in the Azure Boards web channel in the chat in real time. And this makes it really easy to see what's going on without having to leave the Microsoft Teams experience. Now, we've also configured the Azure DevOps app to show our board right here inside of Teams. And what's even better, you can do real work here. You can move items, assign things, make updates, all right here without having to leave Teams. And just like before, you can see these things happening in real time in the Azure Boards web channel. All right, I noticed a moment ago that Abel had moved one of these tasks to the done column because he completed it, right? So here we go, there it is. So that tells me there's probably a pull request that's open. So let's go check. We'll pop on over to our GitHub web channel and we'll look at the pull request tab. And as you can see, 5 hours ago, Abel opened up a pull request because he added that security.markdown file and he wanted the team to review it. So here I've started the review process for this pull request, telling the team, hey, let's go ahead and review it. And it looks like he's adding that sample.security.markdown file. And that's totally fine for us because, we're just starting out with this file. So I'm going to go ahead and add a comment and write him a comment telling him, hey, everything looks great. And I'm going to go ahead and merge this. So I'm going to set it to approve and submit my review. And now that that is all done, you can see there is one approval, and I'm going to go ahead and merge this pull request. And after clicking merge pull request, you see there's a note here about the merge that's about to happen, and I'll go ahead and confirm it. And you'll see that the pull request was successfully merged into the main branch. Now, if we go back into Teams, the web channel, you'll see all the updates have happened in real time, and it's been reported right here inside the channel. And this freaking rocks, right? Because the beauty of this is the rest of the team, they didn't have to be inside of GitHub. Now they can see these notifications as they're doing their daily work, and these notifications happen right inside of Microsoft Teams. Now that we've taken a look at GitHub and Microsoft Teams, we're going to take a look at Visual Studio Code and how that can help Tailwind traders. Visual Studio Code is an open source free text editor. The source code, it's on GitHub, and you can download and run this app on Windows, Linux, and Mac. And it has Git commands built right into it. It also has language support for all kinds of languages through extensions. Now, these extensions, they can be found in Visual Studio Code Marketplace, where there are literally thousands of extensions. Extensions for all kinds of languages, extensions for tooling support, extensions for connectivity and deployment, and extensions that support multiple cloud, not just Azure. So here's an example of a cool extension. This extension is for the Azure CLI, and you can create a script with the Azure CLI which lets you use the command line to do just about anything inside of Azure. Now you can save this file as a bash file, as a shell script, as a PowerShell script, or as a .az CLI file. Now if you save it as a .az CLI file, that's when the magic happens, right? Because you get IntelliSense and code snippets that you can use inside of your code. It also has integrated terminal, and you can create a side-by-side editor to make sure your CLI script is doing what it's supposed to do. And you can get documentation on mouseovers as well. Here's another cool example. This is the GitHub pull request and issues. Now, Git capabilities for push, pull, and other basic Git commands are built right into VS Code, the core product. However, GitHub-specific things like tracking issues and pull requests, those are not. But you can download this pull request extension, and now you can do things like review and comment on pull requests, and validate pull requests, and check out users. And these are all built. There are also some built-in actions to start a branch or create issues from to-do comments, right? So a really powerful extension. There's also a live share extension pack that's super, super cool. This lets you code and collaborate in real time with anyone else that has VS Code. They need VS Code and the live share extension pack. And you can do all this live coding with both video and chat. So enough of flipping around through slides. Let's see all these cool things in action. So now Brian Benz is going to come. He's going to jump in and show us the power of Visual Studio Code.
So here's Visual Studio Code, and I'm working on a site called Tailwind Traders website. This is a local clone of something that I have on GitHub. And basically the code is here on the left. There's something I'm editing on the right, in this case a YAML file. And here's the GitHub capabilities that we have built into it, which I'll be demoing a little bit. The extensions that I mentioned before are here. So these are the extensions I have enabled, and then they make recommendations on other extensions. There's also the GitHub pull requests extension that I mentioned. And here's, for example, pull request created by me, and it's got all kinds of information in here about the pull request. This is actually me doing a reverse pull to bring in the latest version of Tailwind Traders from the main site. So let's have a look at that on GitHub and see what it looks like. So here's the Tailwind Traders website on GitHub. And as you can see, it's forked from Microsoft Tailwind Traders website. I've got several commits that I've done, and you can see over here on the right, it's 40% JavaScript, 31% CSS. It's got some C#, some PowerShell, some HTML. It's got a shell script in there and some other, which is Node.js and a couple other things. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to edit some actions that we have created, and we're going to push this to a website that we've already set up. So I'm actually going to go down here. If I look at my code, I want to change this. Instead of saying deploy to website, I want to call it deploy to staging website, because we're actually deploying to a staging site up here. Deploy. It's called Bben's Tailwind Staging. So let's save that. And if you'll see over here on the left, it tells me if I go into my built-in GitHub capabilities here, I've got one change, which is main YAML, and that needs to be committed. So let's say I change that, change deployment to staging. All right, I save that. If I click the little checkbox here, it's going to tell me it automatically commits it, but I forgot to stage it. So this is one of the nice things about Visual Studio Code. It reminds me, hey, you have nothing staged to commit. Do you want to stage your changes and commit them? Yes. So it will actually commit them. Now I have different options for actually getting this out to the GitHub repo. Remember, this is my local clone. So I can just push, or I can do a sync. I really like doing the sync because it pushes and pulls any commits. So if this is being worked on collaboratively, I make sure that I have the most recent versions from the upstream. Okay, so now the change is gone and it's been committed. So what happens, this is a GitHub action, and it's a GitHub action on push. So what's going to happen is when you actually push out to the repo, an action will be triggered. So let's check out that action. The action's actually working. So let's watch that run. And let's actually go into the build and have a look at that. So right now it's installing dependencies, and then it's going to build. So let's just wait for that build and make sure it succeeds. Looks like the build went through, the test went through, and now we're going to publish. So in a few seconds, this should actually publish out to the website once we get down to the deployment stage. Oh no, looks like it's failed at the publish stage. And unfortunately, I'm not sure why. Let's scroll through here and see if we can find out exactly what the error message is. One of the things that is possible at this point is that this is a GitHub Actions environment. It's a very standardized environment that GitHub Actions uses, but maybe there's some special things set up in our development environment that this would run. So for example, this might work on a developer's machine, but for some reason it doesn't work in the GitHub Actions generic environment. So there is one thing we can do to test that out. And it looks like in this case, it's not a problem with NPM, but there is a error on Node SAS, which looks like a dependency on Node. So I know it's something to do with Node. But before I go too far into debugging this, why don't I try running it on a customized environment and see if that works. So to do that, I can actually use something else that's inside of GitHub. If I go straight into my Tailwind Traders main site, I can open with code spaces. So code spaces for GitHub is a way to create a standardized environment that you can reuse. So let's create a new code space, And what that's going to do is create a space based on the parameters that my organization has set up inside of here. And there might be something special in here that runs that wouldn't run in the generic environment and allows me to publish and deploy this. So it takes a few seconds to start the code space. But once that's done, it's going to build a container and it's going to run the container, and then I'm going to have everything in my environment here just the way it looked in Visual Studio Code. Now here we are. It's just opening the code. So basically, if you look over on the right, it initializes a code space, builds a container, runs the container, and then it configures the code space for you. So it basically does a clone into this environment. And it creates this container in a environment that can be reused later. So now we can check out this code, and we can see here, for example, we have issues with Tailwind Traders Web, and let's go in and see what that is. So yeah, looks like the object release, something to do with the attributes here. Yeah, it's very odd. So this isn't going to work even in this environment. Unfortunately, it's not going to work. There's just something wrong with the build and the way it publishes. It's very strange that it worked when you did the build, but not the publish. So let's check out another way we can do this. And by the way, I'm showing you this from GitHub, so code space is on GitHub from the web. There is another way to access that, and that is through the remote extensions. If you go to Visual Studio Code over here, there is a way to connect to code spaces here, and that'll be the code spaces on GitHub, but you'll be opening it in a new version of Visual Studio Code. It'll look at pretty much the same as it did in that environment that I just showed you. All right, so the next thing we want to do is we want to figure out, I'm at the end of determining, end of my skills and abilities and determining what is exactly wrong with this build. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect with a colleague and see if he can help me. This code obviously has some issues. I'm going to need some help figuring out exactly what those issues are. So because I installed the live share extension pack that I mentioned earlier in the slides, I can actually start a live collaboration session, and it's copied to my clipboard now. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to phone a friend. I'm going to phone my colleague, Zach, and Zach's going to hop on the line and help me figure this out. So let's do that now. Calling Zach.
Hey, Brian, what's up?
Hey, Zach, how you doing? You got a few minutes?
Sure. What's going on?
Okay, cool. I've got an issue with some code. I can't quite figure out exactly what it is, and I could really use your expertise. So I'm sending you a live share link. You should see it in the Teams chat now.
Yes. Okay, let me join that.
Okay, cool. Great. I'm going to take you off this screen. All right, so let's have a look at the code now. So Zach has joined the collaborative session, so great. So here's the code, basically. It's a GitHub action, and it seems to be failing on Node. I'm not sure exactly why, but I was hoping you could help me out there.
Yeah, so it looks like you have your Node version set to 14, and it might build in that environment, but I think your target environment requires an older version. So let's try Node 10.
Okay.
And see how that goes. I'll save this for you.
Beautiful. Thank you, sir. All right, so if we go back into our GitHub controls here, you'll see that there is one change, and it's already populated a comment here, which is co-authored by Zach, so change to Node 10. All right, so what I'll do is I'll commit, and I forgot to stage, so one of the nice things about Visual Studio Code is it reminds you, hey, you don't have anything staged. So yeah, I do want to stage that, and then I could just do a push, but I always find it safer to do a sync. So sync does a push and a pull using the built-in Visual Studio Code commands, and that goes out there. You'll see when this blue finishes that it's actually pushed to the repo. One thing before we leave Visual Studio Code, I did want to mention inside of LiveShare, I could do an audio call as well if I have multiple people and maybe they don't have Teams set up. But for now, I just kept it simple, and Zach and I are talking on Teams instead of joining the chat here. So good to use the tools no matter what you have. There is a way to share the audio. So let's go over to the GitHub action now. If we go in here to the website, if I check actions, as expected, I see that it's running as co-authored by Zach, and the build is in progress, and should just take a couple of seconds to go here. All right, looks like publish happened. That is farther than we got before, so this is great. So let's just check out and make sure it publishes to the website. Well, looks like we published to the website. Let's go back in there and let's check this out. So it should be this URL. Should be able to open it. Let's go in a new tab. Yeah, looks like the website's loaded. Fantastic. So we solved that problem in a second. That's what collaboration is all about. Thanks very much, Zach, for your help in that live collaboration session.
No problem, Brian. Have a great day.
All right, you too. Thanks.
Thanks, Brian. Man, that was a very cool demo showing the power of Visual Studio Code, code spaces in GitHub, and also LiveShare. Okay, so we've covered a lot in this session, so let's do a quick recap. At a high level, we covered how laying a solid foundation for a DevOps strategy can help solve the issues that Tailwind Traders has been facing. And now that Tailwind Traders has a story for source control, collaboration, and shared tooling, they are on the right track to continue down the path of a full DevOps solution. So we also talked about what is DevOps, what is source control, with a quick intro to Git and also GitHub. We discussed how Microsoft Teams has enabled more effective collaboration across the Tailwind Traders organization. And we looked at how Visual Studio Code can help solve problems with shared tooling and even more collaboration. So if you'd like to take a deeper look into what DevOps is with overviews, tutorials, samples, and more, head over to aka.ms, all things DevOps, where you'll find our DevOps Resource Center. And if you'd like to explore the collection of Microsoft Learn content for the AZ400 Designing and Implementing Microsoft DevOps Solution certification, head on over to aka.ms Getting Started DevOps. If you'd like to learn more about getting certified, you can head on over to aka.ms/AZ400cert. So, thank you all so much for joining us.